we can give them a minute.
Yeah, that's okay. I think maybe people can join by then too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a nice format that they have on Medium because the previous session that we had, it did go smoothly. So
Mm-hmm.
just this small glitch. Vitaly, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's perfect now.
Great. Yay.
That's great. It was so strange, that probably can hear you, but I'm not. I don't know what's happening. Yeah.
No, that's cool.
Prioritizing.
Great. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining this or choosing to join this session out of the so many of the number of sessions we have. Um, I want to thank both Rosie and Vitali for agreeing to do this session. So I'll go around just introducing each of us, and then we can get on to the questions. So I'm Suchithra, and I'm a product designer at Arista Networks. And I have my two amazing colleagues, Rosie and Vitali, here in this session. So Rosie is a design product manager at Arista, and she's worked across different design disciplines for the past decade, and mostly on the B2B side, across catering to different customers of different uh, groups and various needs. And Vitali is a product designer on Arista, at Arista, and he's been in the B2B space for the past 10 years, and he's been designing and leading teams, in fact, in data security, recovery, business support system management for telecommunications. And currently, he's tackling the challenges for network observability at Arista. So that's a mouthful for me to say. So that is quite an experience for both of you. I think Rosie's, I think there are no big terms there, but definitely the experience speaks for itself. And I do want to touch upon why I chose to bring up this session or chose to do this topic before we get into it. I think as a design student or a practitioner, I did not envision myself designing for a technical domain or technical products, right? And mostly because these career experiences are not spoken about or broadcasted in the design community. And I think working in the domain has sort of flipped a lot of my assumptions, and it's given me a lot of learnings. And I think it's time that we do start talking about it. So and hence the idea for the session. And I brought on two of the best people that I think can speak for these experiences. So that's enough of the intro, I think. We'll get into it, and I'll start off with my first question, which is, so both of you have experience working in consumer facing or less technical domains, right? So in your opinion, what is the main difference of how product design functions in complex and technical areas? I'll start off with Rosie.
Thank you. I'll try to speak slowly and clearly here. Okay,
Great.
so comparing those two, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is probably relatability in relation to the industry. So knowing your user and their needs. So like when it comes to consumer products, there's a much higher chance that you'll be able to actually relate to that industry on a personal level. So like you yourself are more likely able to like put yourselves in the shoes of the customer. It's possible it's something that you yourself use every day, or like could easily become a user of. But commonly with enterprise solutions, right, and designing those, that ability to make a good assumption, right, about what a user might need or what their expectation is reduced. So it's very specific. It's a very specific user type usually, or job story, as we like to call them, that you more than likely haven't experienced, with lots of nuances. Um, you're not naturally aware of. So getting into the mindset of the user, understanding the expectation on their part, that requires more work for sure. And then, as well as in relation to relatability, um, when you're doing competitor analysis, if you're doing competitor analysis, understanding that baseline in the industry, it's a little bit more challenging, not as accessible sometimes. So if using similar products, it's not as easy. And even if you start using them, because it's not something that you're doing naturally, you most likely won't have a realistic use case to try them out. So you're not getting an accurate kind of experience with them. So, that would be the first thing that I would think about, would be the relatability aspect of it.
Great.
Yeah. I can continue. So first of all, yes, Suchithra, thanks for the introduction. Beautiful. And about this. So I think the designing product for consumer facing, which is B2C, and business facing B2B industries involve different approaches, consideration due to the distinctive nature of the audience and goals. So question is like, who's the subject and what is the problem we need to solve, right? Is this individual consumer satisfaction engagement rate metrics here, right, for B2C, for example, or we're solving specific business problems and enhancing efficiency where the focus is on providing tools and features that aid professionals in their task, right? And how do we solve the problem, right? What the process we establish indoors to work on a product, who is involved in this process, right? So due to the business size, process transparency, and effective documentation management, right? Is it from the small business perspective, from B2C perspective, we may think that proximity, connection, like to the evangelist of the solution, right, to the business owner, may be very, very, very close. So you may be really kind of getting information just from the hands of this person, right? However, in the complex business environment, right, you may be on a big scale of communication, right? How it getting done, right? How you can do this actually within the kind of complex process involving, I don't know, many people, right? And what is the important question is like here, what is the solution and product architecture, right? How complex it is, right? And it always can have impact, right? And the way how we got the feedback. So how easily we can access customers, right? To do usability tests, content tests, contextual inquiries, or like ask people to participate in alpha or beta stages, right? And how complex it can be in the B2B sphere just to kind of maintain this feedback loop with customer decision makers or sales engineers, and addressing these efficiency functional gaps, and participate in usability issues. So this is different nature of the things.
Absolutely, and I think both of your points kind of circle around understanding users, right? And as designers, we rely on a lot of our intuition sometimes, but it's a bit broken or we're thrown off in a complex domain because we can't relate to it or relate to the tasks or the users as much as we want to. And I know that's why even within our team, we really value, at least the first few months you're working, to be able to develop that intuition about a user. We really value that. Right. So great answers on that. And I know we will touch upon a lot of these things that you said in the subsequent questions. Again, as we spoke about, I think both of you spoke about challenges too, right? Eventually, these present as challenges for a designer. So designing in this space is like slowly assembling bits and pieces. It's quite complex, right? You can't move pieces as easily as you want to in other domains. So it makes the nature of work quite intricate, and that definitely brings up challenges. So tell us some challenges that are quite common here, and then how you tackle them.
Yeah, well, for this one, whenever I get asked this question, like it's always at the forefront of my mind is the subject matter, right? So myself and probably most people on our team, didn't have, so our domain is networking. So we didn't have previous experience in networking. So this is knowledge that you have to pick up generally project by project. It can be kind of intimidating going into your first project in a new company where everyone else on the project or the team or the area knows all the inner workings, knows the jargon of the industry, and you've never really interacted with it at that level. So getting up to speed on subject matter is a really big part of it, and it stands to impact the success of your work. So in terms of the solution there, there's lots of different things you can do to educate yourself on that subject matter, whether that's going externally and doing, official courses or doing online courses like Udemy. That's great. But I would really, an approach I would really kind of advise here is to kind of embrace the immaturity in this industry and use everyone around you in your team or your area's knowledge to your advantage. All sources are great, but the people around you who have been working with your customers for a long time will have a much more specific and relevant take on things. And they want to help you, right? Like your success is the team's success, which is their success. So you need to make sure at that beginning stage when you're, getting up to speed on subject matter, talk to people, ask them questions. I really, there's, especially at the beginning, right? You are a beginner. People acknowledge that it's the time to ask all of the questions, and people with more experience than you, they can often forget to kind of go really basic with stuff. They expect you to know certain things because they do, and they forget sometimes. And you have to really kind of bring it down to what the foundational level of this, and really understanding that core knowledge. And that really is what will help you in the long run, is asking those questions, because otherwise you'll regret it, right? You'll be later on down the line and you're working on something and you're like, oh yeah, I really don't know much about that. I have to go back now and like backtrack and, figure out what that is. So yeah, I would say kind of just embrace that immaturity and really kind of use it to your advantage.
Definitely.
Yeah, I can continue this, I think, in a little bit kind of different angle, but still kind of in the same subject. So I think the challenge sometimes is, like not being overwhelmed and not stuck in the process, right? And I remember this from, I don't know, being myself stuck sometimes, right? From people whom I used to mentor, right? And mentoring, and this is important thing, right? And first of all, it's hard to begin with a blank slate, so you need to figure out communication, even if the process is kind of more or less identified and like known in the company. It's hard to understand for the certain project is how to maintain the knowledge of the product documentation, how to lead meetings and follow up on the same questions. Is there somebody to validate actually your ideas against, and moreover to tell about solution and explain the cases, right? It's kind of while you're explaining, you even better understand what you've been told, right? So how you can solve this, right? Is there a kind of project design lead which you can like rely on actually being this communication? And usually, yes, designers feel stuck and kind of for the process they become bottlenecks. So it's kind of two things on the same side, right? So you feel awful as a designer, you feel maybe not kind of great about yourself in this situation, right? And for the overall process you become a bottleneck, and it's not very comfortable situation, right? And so I think so to overcome this chaotic and overwhelming state, we need to understand that kind of this product design way of thinking is a marathon, right? So you need to maintain a speed, right? And to maintain the speed, you need to be comfortable with the basics of the product communication and documentation, but have a habit to do some things, right? So it's important to kind of to write follow-ups and meeting notes, and record interviews with your indoor stakeholders, right? Which is easy, much easier than kind of research for like customers. So do something indoor, do something right kind of on a daily basis, right? And do this analysis exercises to like pick up necessary understanding from the all the information which you have as an input, right? And be ready to kind of share these early findings with your lead designer, somebody who you kind of rely on. That's also a big challenge.
Yeah, I think both of you touch upon slightly different, but also a very common area in that is subject matter, right? One biggest challenge at least is knowing you're not the person who would know the most about the area, although you're the designer. It is a hard pill to swallow, but you know that although you're the advocate for the user, you might not know everything about them. So I think really reaching out to people in the company and or on the team who have a stake in the project, and then getting these bits and pieces of information from them, right, is quite crucial. And developing those relationships too is quite important in these domains. And to Vitaly's point, I think how do you gather these information, right? It's an art itself, right? Like, because in these
Absolutely,
meetings, a lot of technical things are being said, and it's quite overwhelming to be in them. So how do you take the information that you've gotten and then craft it into a scope and convert it into design, right? So I think a lot of good points there, and I think those are definitely big challenges that I would agree with too. So another thing that's quite complex too is research, and I know we face that quite often. Research in these domains can be quite tricky, right? You either have limited access to users for various security or legal reasons, or it's quite hard to have an easy conversation because they are highly technical and we might not speak the same language. So we do maybe have to rely on other people to get information. How do you think you can tackle these issues, or could you give us some examples or how you've done them in the past?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the most common issues we see with research is, not, being able to access your users, right? There are different things you can do to improve your research when it's not always, ideal, where you don't have a direct channel to users. Honestly, something that might be overlooked is talking to customer support. So this is a great form of research. They hear directly from your customers. That's exactly what, they have a great relationship with them in terms of having communication. So setting up a system or a channel for you to receive relevant information from them that can directly improve the product is a pretty great idea. Chances are there are possibly multiple obvious issues or users, rephrase that. There are probably multiple issues that users are complaining about. And if it's worth exploring, figure out, is there extra information or context there that can help you to learn a little bit more about those scenarios or what's triggering those issues. So having that set up at some kind of feedback channel there is pretty crucial. The next thing I would do is maybe not as straightforward in terms of having internal processes, but so if going externally and researching other users of a similar or the same story or user type. So having other users in the industry, i.e. not your users necessarily, but who have experienced the same issue. So what are they saying about it? I think that collecting individual anecdotal experiences of similar users in that domain can be really helpful. So yeah, they're not using your product, right? But they might be discussing a general issue, that most people in that industry are experiencing. And they're referencing their own specific personal experience, which might include a detail that you just hadn't considered. So are they talking about a solution that they'd love to have, but they haven't found it yet? Is that something that you could do for your users? Because in theory, these are people who could end up being your users eventually. So I think that's always really useful. And then the next one maybe is a bit more obvious, but I think analytics in general. But what is the data telling you? Not only analytics about actual interactions and bounce rates, etc., but what about if your product has some kind of knowledge base or help center? Are there specific search terms being used more than others? Are there links being clicked more? Are there videos being watched the most? What subject matter is being accessed the most by your users? And this can give you a really good idea of where users are getting stuck. So, and it's very specific to your product, right? It's directly about how they're interacting with it. So I think that's always really useful to have. So when it comes to research and not having always having access to users, there's some really good methods to try out.
Yeah, I think they're really creative ways also to doing research. Sorry, I'll let Vitaly continue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And indeed, I mean, customers quite enclosed. There may be lots of constraints and security reasons to have the actual conversation recorded, or, even problematic to schedule this, because that's not a way of kind of primary contact between, designer on the team and customer, but there's one way, so maybe to look inside, right? So, and I just continue this point, I think first point from Rosee's, so kind of who can help move into the target research from the indoor, right? So is there kind of who have the value and authority to help you with this, right? So involve project managers, right? Involve product manager, involve executive people to help with this, because if you bring this ideas, right? And understanding how important this can be, right? How important research can be. So it would be really good to achieve this. But if there are constraints, if they're problematic, so look indoors, right? So of course need to explore indoor possibilities. And yes, there are possibly sales engineers, there are field engineers, right? There are possibly technical support team who actually work with customer on daily basis and help them troubleshoot issues, navigation into the solution, right? And probably they're kind of technology evangelist, like who understand the subject matter just around you. So the important here is to build this connection, right? And there are plenty of methodologies or a research technique which can be involved in this process, right? So kind of stakeholder workshops, right? Same usability testing may be done indoors, surveys, information architecture validation, and so on. So this is lots of possibilities about the indoors research.
Yeah, and I think some of the ways that both of you, or techniques that both of you are mentioning, are not quite underrated, right? Not just in a technical domain. I think for any other domain too, they could be really valuable. And as much as we talk about design process in theory and user interviews and usability testing and direct access, we know it always doesn't go in the ideal way, right? And there has to be these different access points that we should be open to, such as customer support, right? They're really valuable. And forums, or looking at the help center content metrics, right? I think definitely, and stakeholder workshops. I think they're definitely some really interesting methods that people can try out. Sorry, I think we might be close to time, and I don't know if people have posted all of the questions that they want to ask to, but I know there is one from Byron. So maybe we start off with that, and if we still have time, just a heads up. So Medium doesn't immediately shut down the session. We can go on how much ever we want, but I think maybe just being careful of time, we can answer that question, and then maybe we do have one of our own questions to go to. So Byron asks, technical domains can be difficult to navigate. You mentioned that relying on your team is a good way to get information. How do you handle reluctance to share information due to time constraints or generic responses? It's a tricky one. And Rosee, do you want to? Yeah.
I mean, sorry, not to cut across you. I think that when it comes to time constraints, I think a good idea here is to kind of phrase it in a way, like if you're looking for something very specific, framing it in a way that makes it easier for them to give you an answer is probably a good solution here. So, we talked about how you're brand new to this subject matter, you don't know anything about it. So you're going to someone, you're saying, can you tell me about this, please? I don't know anything about it. And maybe there are some time constraints. And so kind of boiling it down to one or two or however many key points that you absolutely rely on that are blocking you can, help them to figure out which parts to focus on, right? Or at least to ask them to point you in a more specific direction rather than saying, like, it's in this doc, talk about, where that is. So I think that probably is a good idea when it comes to time constraints, because time constraints, we're thinking about, okay, we've got a project and it's a deadline. So you do want to get more specific about, okay, what specifically do I need to know about right now? What's the priority there? And explain that to them, explain to them that, like, there is a priority here. We do really need this information. Can you just, at least kind of talk about it in this more kind of, I suppose, abstract form, and then give context where necessary. And then if not, right, say they just don't have time to talk to you, just asking them to point you in the direction of somebody else who can. I'm sure there's, a large group of people who can give you information about some parts of it, and then there's people who can give you more information about different parts of it. So not one person's going to tell you about everything, but you'll get small pieces from every different person, and you never know, like, they might tell you something that you didn't expect or that no one else was aware of, and even talking about the same thing, if you go to different people about it, they might frame it a different way that makes you think about it differently. So asking them to redirect you, or just to boil it down into something, focus on the priority there, I think that would be a good first step anyway.
Completely. And maybe something that I can add is when your team is on a time constraint, this is just a different side of it, you're also likely on a time constraint. So it's important one thing is, when we spoke about overwhelming information, as much as you need to know the subject matter you're in, as long as it's not a blocking question, it's important to know, take what you need at that point and not really get into that rabbit hole of, I need to know everything. Yes, I think in the ideal scenario, you need to know everything about networking to be able to design it into the best depth possible, right? But again, we all work with time. So I think sometimes you just have to take what you have, and then hopefully in the next iteration, possibly you relearn and you get an answer to that. But yeah, sorry, Vitaly, if you have a response for that.
Yeah, I want to say that this is a great question, and I was mentioning, like habit and kind of habitual approach to the work. So I think that of course you will get like responses like Byron mentioned, like yeah, this is in the doc, like I don't want to spend time to talk with you, or I don't have anything, right? So kind of you need to have this kind of attitude that maybe this situation, right, is it this is okay, right? So but you need to continue this, like kind of do this stuff and plan this. This is also important, right? So to actually ask people in the right time, sometime like will give you the result, because there may be like some wrong time. So be prepared to this, right? So plan a little bit, like make them aware then you're gonna do this, like think about kind of quantitative things, right? So kind of plan 10, you get 5. This is good, right? And don't push to specific person, like meaning that, yeah, I know just your feedback. In terms of the research, that may be quantitative, quantitative data, right, is the point, right? Because you need to compress all these findings together, and that would be a map picture, actually, right? So that's I guess my answer.
Power of numbers, I guess, right? Like if you know one person might not do the job, make sure you hit up 10 people, hoping to get at least one answer from them. Yeah, I definitely think these are different. It is tricky getting information because not everybody knows all of the pieces, right? As I said, the team only has bits and pieces, and it's quite hard. Sometimes they might not know it themselves, right? And then hence there's an apprehension to discuss it even further. So there are a lot of working parts, but I guess approaching different people and then putting it in the right way so that we save everybody's time does help.
And having them pass you on then as well when they've given you their extent of the knowledge.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't think there's any more. Let me just check.
No, there's one more. Yeah, if you can check. Okay.
Sorry, let me check.
I'm only seeing one.
Yeah, I don't think there's another. So maybe there is one question, but I feel like somebody's asked what type of projects would you like to be involved with in the future, and I'm trying to understand their intention in asking it. But I guess maybe we could weave it into the question that we had, right?
Yeah.
In the last question, which was about, how do you think working in such a domain has helped your own professional growth, right? And what type of projects would you like to be involved in the future? Would you like to continue in this scenario and keep working on complexity, or take on maybe something that's easier, or at least seemingly easier?
Yeah, seemingly. Yeah, I mean, my answer to that is pretty simple, right? But it's really helped me with just my confidence, like having confidence to move forward in my career, to challenge myself, so it really equips you with amazing problem solving skills when you're working with these types of problems. So I feel like for me in the future, I suppose you're always looking to be challenged, right? You always want to move forward on something that's going to push you further, or you to push yourself further, really. So maybe that's, I don't know, different size projects, different lengths of time, or just kind of context switching within the domain, getting a fresh take on the domain, from a different angle. But I would say always continue to challenge yourself. That's what I try to do anyway. And I think that you'll learn so much going forward, and you'll just have so many tools, to help you as you move forward in your career. So
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, just to continue on this. So it's of course kind of technical knowledge of the domain itself. So whenever you get into a company, right, in this big business, and the like what we have, right, software, enterprise software, is a knowledge about the technical stuff, right? As it is a growth of your personal soft skill and communication, and it is for me like that, of course. And you trying to operate with the large scale project flows, especially, for example, if they're kind of broad product line, right? So you understand how it actually can be presented for the user on the kind of end-to-end scenario, right? It's not only small thing that you may be focused on somewhere else, but it is complex scenario, right? Which may involve several products, like being kind of one line up for the customer, right? And yeah, and the possibility, of course, to increase your self-management skills, right? So that's again kind of linking back to what I'm saying, right? So how I manage myself, right? So I have successfully in my habits to actually, like getting that data, right? So am I kind of understanding the project and be effective on, like getting out the result of this, right? So and kind of can I prioritize things on my pipeline specifically, right? Which is also, like quite a big, right, in terms of the compared to the scale of the project, right? Yeah. So that's thing about the kind of what can be nice from the complex and technical domain, right? And just I don't know answer to the question, right, myself. What about kind of next project? But what I've been, like taught days ago, like years ago, is like you say yes, like to opportunities. You kind of, there are no kind of bad good projects, like complex and non-complex, right? There are always something, like very interesting in these details of like this interaction. So there can be so much more there, and just be open to this, like possibilities, and try to be attentive to details, and very much, like kind of keen to do things, like to achieve this kind of right, like flow, right interaction, or right kind of steps in this is really great.
Yeah. Those, oh, sorry, I think Rosee, did you want to continue on that?
Oh, I was just going to say that I agree that something that that I think generally I would advise is to, when it comes to challenging yourself, it's not just about the technical domain, right? It's also about, as Vitaly said, the process. If there's a part of the process that you could improve on, or that you don't have a lot of experience with, taking projects on where you'll get more of that, or be exposed to more of that, or have more requirements there in that area. Honestly, like, you really want to kind of build on your entire process and all the different aspects of that. And I think that's a really good way to also challenge yourself, while in the same kind of domain. So
I think both of you have made some very good points. I think the biggest challenge is things are a lot more difficult here, right? Like, because again, subject matter, getting information. So I completely get Rosee's point about it just builds your confidence that you can do anything, because in a technical domain, you are somehow the person who knows the least. So to go from there to scale up to somebody who can do a lot of things, I think that can really, really build a lot of confidence in you. And as Vitaly said, you become a sort of a project manager yourself, because you are sort of leading and figuring out how to get information, how do you process these technical things into design. You're doing a lot of different roles in a way. So those are both great answers, and those are definitely, I would say, some rewarding aspects that I agree with too, right? I don't think there are any more questions. No, they're not. And I mean, we can go on if we want to, but I think we might want to wrap it up at this point. So thank you, Rosee and Vitaly, for coming on this and giving such great answers. I think a lot of those reflect what I've been feeling, and hence the urge to do this session. And I think that has definitely worked out well. So thanks once again. And thanks to everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah. Bye.